Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Baldwin. He's fuming. He's peddling new conspiracies, and he's lashing out. That is the president of the United States right now. Why, you ask? Well, you might need to hold on a second, sit down, grab a cup of coffee, because I need to bring out the list. The Republican losses in the midterm elections, for one. The PR mess of his trip to France is another. A very public arm twisting coming from the First Lady, and the Mueller investigation inching closer to a conclusion. As one White House official puts it to CNN, he's pissed at damn near everyone. So, with all that, what could make his mood even worse? There is something, a judge's ruling this morning, that could delay the recount of the high-profile races in Florida. And here is where his new conspiracy theory comes in, telling the Daily Caller in an interview that voter fraud, in his view, is very real. Here's the quote for you. Sometimes they go to their car, put on a different hat, put on a different shirt, come in and vote again. As if I needed to say this again, there is no evidence of this happening in Florida or anywhere else. Let's get to Caitlin Collins now. She's at the White House. She's joining me right now. Caitlin, forget the hats, forget the shirts, forget any of the clothing. I'm almost afraid to ask, what is the mood at the White House right now?
Well, it's pretty dark, Kate, and the president is maintaining on Twitter that everything's fine. He says it's running smoothly, but that's not what aides inside the White House say, and it's not how they're describing the president's mood, which they say has gotten darker as the days have gone by since the president returned from that trip to Paris, which turned into a PR debacle after he canceled that planned trip to a military cemetery due to the weather. Now, the president seems to be trying to make up for that today. He's got several events related to the military on his schedule starting any minute now today. But overall, the president's mood is continuing to be dark. He's continuing to isolate himself, aides say, and there seems to be fear of a major staff shakeup, not just among the usual suspects here at the White House whose jobs have been on the lines before, but also among other aides. Now, that's not the only thing the president is lashing out about. We've also seen from Twitter this morning that he is hyper-focused on the Mueller investigation. Once again, after a brief reprieve from those tweets going after the special counsel, he is back in full force today, Kate, going after him, saying that the inner workings of the Mueller investigation are a total mess. He says they are screaming and shouting at people, horribly threatening them to come up with answers they want. He calls him a disgrace to our nation. Then he later goes on to criticize Bob Mueller, saying he has conflicted himself, saying that he worked for Obama for 8 years, but Kate, to provide a little bit of a fact check for that, Mueller didn't work for Obama for 8 years. He ran the FBI under George W. Bush for nearly 8 years and then remained the FBI director under President Obama for 4 years. And President Trump keeps going back to this criticism, saying that he wasn't Senate confirmed as the special counsel because that has been a criticism of the guy he's picked to run the Justice Department, Matt Whitaker, who was Jeff Sessions' chief of staff. But Robert Mueller was confirmed to the Senate in his time when he needed to be the FBI director. But as the special counsel, you do not need to be confirmed by the Senate. Now, Kate, of course, this comes after the president met with his legal team here on Monday to discuss those written answers that they are going to submit to the special counsel. So you can see why it's front and center on his mind, clearly on Twitter today.
Absolutely. Great to see you, Caitlin. Thank you so much. All right, joining me right now, CNN senior political reporter Nia Malika Henderson and CNN political analyst Julie Pace. She's a Washington bureau chief for the Associated Press. It's great to see you guys. Nia, presidents do get mad. Presidents do have staffing problems. Presidents do suffer losses in the midterms. But with this president, this seems different.
That's right. In some ways, because it's sort of all of those things all at the same time, all the time, right? I mean, this is sort of the running narrative of this presidency, sort of staffing feuds, his anger at his staff, him thinking he wants to fire people but not wanting to actually be the person to carry it out. I mean, if you think about all the people and the issues he's been mad at, Jeff Sessions, Republicans in Congress for not running more closely to him, Jeff Sessions, any number of issues, yelling apparently at Theresa May on the phone at some point, mad at John Kelly at this point because of what happened in France. It's just this sort of constant moodiness and sort of grievances that he's always airing about what's going on around him. And there never seems to be any sort of accountability, right? Many of these things are self-inflicted from this president. It doesn't seem to be at this point any sort of end in sight. Even if there is this massive kind of upheaval at the staffing level, it's not clear that would right his mood.
Julie, we have heard before that the more he sees people talking on TV about staff changes, the less likely he is to make those staff changes. That seems in some way remarkably wag the dog. I'm not sure. But could that be what's going on here?
Yeah, there's been a pretty familiar pattern when this kind of thing comes up, and it's come up repeatedly during the course of Trump's presidency. There are rumors fueled largely by the president's own views on whoever is in his line of sight at that point. But the stories get out there. He sees the stories, he denies them, but ultimately it doesn't change the fact that he wants to see that person go. It may slow down the process. We've seen that happen with numerous people going all the way back to the early days of the administration with Reince Priebus, who was chief of staff, or Sean Spicer. It's Trump's way of sort of trying to make it look like the media doesn't have a real sense of what's going on there. But again, it's largely just a pause. Ultimately, he does follow through on most of these actions.
With Sessions, it was a very long pause. For Jeff Sessions, that probably felt like eternity, but a pause nonetheless. Nia, so the president is now making unfounded claims again about voter fraud. This is exactly what he did after the 2016 election, after he didn't win the popular vote. I just wonder why he's going back to the well on this, especially because all indications are, when it comes to Florida, his candidates are winning.
Yeah, that's right. They're obviously going to go through a recount at some point, and it's unlikely to overturn what the margins are for those Republican candidates. This is a president that likes consistency. Also, his wells, such as they are somewhere between sort of Fantasy Island and Conspiracyville, particularly on this issue of voting. And so it's something he goes back to time and time again to explain losses. Of course, in this case, there probably won't be losses in Florida. There are obviously losses all across the map, on the Senate side, on the House side in particular, and governorships as well. And so, this is him not wanting to take accountability and him not wanting to face any blame. So he makes up some theory about some person putting on a shirt and a hat and a funny mustache and a funny nose to vote over and over again, which is just bonkers. It makes no sense. He doesn't even sort of get credit for creativity with that conspiracy theory. It's just so bizarre.
But Nia, I will fact check you. I don't think he said anything about a funny nose. Don't go that far, my friend. Don't go that far.
That would be more creative.
That is a bridge too far. That is a bridge too far on this one. Julie, he hasn't. But what Nia's talking about, though, is the inability. Forget just. Okay, maybe don't accept responsibility, but just I don't know why he just has to be casting blame. It's really kind of this remarkable thing. He wasn't lashing out at Mueller. There was kind of a pause leading up to the election, right around the election, and since election day. Today, the floodgates just opened. They found no collusion, he says in the tweet. They haven't issued their report yet. They're screaming and shouting at people. I would love to know where he actually got that from. That might be some inside reporting that we would love to see. Mueller worked for Obama for 8 years. We know that he didn't. It was Bush for. These fact checks are exhausting. It was Bush for 8. It was Obama for 4. Why are we hearing about this now? What is going on?
We know that White House officials coming out of the midterm elections have really been bracing for Mueller to reassert himself. Mueller was very quiet in the lead up to the midterm elections, and that appears to be strategic on his part. But we do know that there is a lot of stuff that's on Mueller's plate that he needs to move on. There is a lot of discussion around what's going to happen to Roger Stone, who's a longtime associate of the president. We know that Rick Gates, who was working for the campaign and the transition, is still cooperating. Mike Flynn hasn't been sentenced yet for his guilty plea. And those are just the things that we know about with Bob Mueller. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can imagine we don't know about. And so the White House, Trump in particular, has really been bracing for Mueller to come back. And it's that unknown that really unnerves the president. There's so much that he tries to push back on, but again, so much that he doesn't know, and that is really out of his control at this point.
So if it is out of his control, Nia, if the reporting is that he's pissed at everybody, who or what, do you venture to guess, will get him back on track? And back on track in the most immediate sense is he's about to face a Democratic majority in the House. There's some stuff he needs to be doing and preparing for.
That's right. There isn't a lot of good news ahead for this president in terms of what's going to be happening. Not only the Mueller probe and probably some report released about that, but also Democrats probing into his finances, trying to get his tax return, probing into why folks in the military were sent to the border. What were the conversations around that? So that's the thing that, this could be the tip of the iceberg and the beginning of a long period for this president of frustration and possibly anger about what's going on. And if you think about what will actually happen in Congress in terms of legislation moving forward, unlikely that that's really about to happen. More likely sort of gridlock and real deep dives into the president's background and some of his actions so far.
But it's going to be beautiful bipartisanship. That's what he said. It's going to be beautiful bipartisanship.
Sure.
All bipartisanship is beautiful. Let's just say that. Great to see you guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
coming up for us, the clock is ticking down in the Florida recount saga. Vote tallies are due in less than 4 hours, but one big county may not be ready in time. The election recount deadline in Florida now just 3 hours and 45 minutes away. The clock may be ticking, but it is becoming clear that the largest county in the state is very likely not going to meet the cutoff to submit machine recount totals. This morning, CNN crews on the ground saw no workers, no supervisors, no ballots being scanned in that county, in Palm Beach County. So what happens now with the Senate and governor races on the line? Because don't forget, there are a number of last-minute lawsuits that are still being decided. CNN's Ed Lavandera is on this for us. He's in Florida's capital, Tallahassee, with details on these key court battles. Ed, there have been, I have to say, so many challenges and counter-challenges. It's a bit hard to follow. Where do things stand right now?
Well, there's nearly a dozen different lawsuits and claims being made, most of them being held here at the federal courthouse in downtown Tallahassee. A lot of those decisions and a lot of these cases landing in the hands of just one particular federal judge here. So he's trying to navigate all of these arguments and all of these decisions here as all of these deadlines, Kate, are quickly looming. Remember, today is the deadline, as you mentioned off the top here, of the recount deadline coming up later this afternoon. There are serious questions about whether or not Palm Beach County is going to be able to meet that deadline. But in one of those lawsuits that really has been brought by Senator Bill Nelson and Democrats here in Florida, challenging this question of whether or not the signatures on these mail-in ballots are proper. This affects about 5,000 votes, we are told. The judge in this case has ruled that there has been an extension until Saturday afternoon to clear up the questions surrounding these signatures. So the real question is, how are these people going to find out? And it's a variety of ways from what we understand. These are some 5,000 people spread out across the state. Democratic and Republican lawyers will be reaching out to many of these people. Maybe election officials can reach out to them. They can also, if they have been notified that they are in this pile of ballots, the voters can also reach out. So how exactly all of that is going to play out here in the next couple of days is still very much up in the air. Democrats are calling this ruling a victory so far. A lawyer and representatives for Rick Scott say that they have appealed the decision. They are very angry about the ruling, and also went on to say that the lawyer in this case for the Democrats is actually arguing the exact opposite argument in a similar case in Arizona, and that the lawyer in this case, Mark Elias, is trying to rack up massive legal fees regardless of the blatant hypocrisy or the damage this will do to Bill Nelson's legacy. So the barbs are flying back and forth here as these deadlines are quickly approaching. Kate?
All right, Ed, thank you so much. We'll sit close to you. Joining me right now, though, to discuss is Brad Todd. He's a senior advisor to the Rick Scott campaign. Thanks for coming in, Brad.
Thanks for having me, Kate.
So as Ed was talking about, your campaign's appealing the judge's ruling on extending the deadline for what appears to be thousands of voters to sort out problems with signatures on ballots. If the goal is to have every legal vote count, why not give voters 2 more days if the judge has ruled that it's okay?
Well, first off, let's be clear. I want to correct one thing. The judge did not say that every signature that was mismatched can be corrected. He said that every signature of a voter who was belatedly notified can come in and correct their signature before Saturday. Okay. He didn't really explain what belatedly means. Under Florida law, Once you submit a signature that the Elections Commission cannot match, and in open court yesterday, supervisors of elections testified, look, we give the benefit of the doubt to the voter. Any common loop, anything that vaguely looks at all like their signature that's on record is counted, that the voter gets the benefit of the doubt. Then they're notified if their signature didn't match, and they can come in before Monday at 5 p.m., the day before the election. That's Florida law. And I would also note, Kate, that's Florida law that was passed unanimously in the Florida legislature. The Democrats and Bill Nelson's campaign are suing to throw that out. Meanwhile, every Democrat in the Florida legislature supported it. If they didn't think that was an appropriate law, they should have debated it then.
But let's talk about right now. Let's talk about this very moment. If the judge says it's okay to extend the deadline for this group of people to sort this out by Saturday, why not give them? Why are you appealing it? Why not give them the time?
First off, because Florida's election laws were very clear, and Florida's election laws were set, and the votes that were cast legally and according to Florida's election law and received in a timely manner, those are the legal votes, and those are the votes that were counted, and that's what should count.
And then you face criticism of why not do you want every legal vote to count?
We do. Every vote that was legally received at a Board of Elections office in a timely fashion. That's why we have these election laws, these anti-fraud laws, is so that we can all be certain which votes are going to be legal.
Let's talk about fraud.
If the Democrats didn't like it, they should have raised this point in the legislature when all the Democratic representatives were voting for it.
Let's talk about fraud. Have you seen any evidence of people? Sometimes they go to their car, put on a different hat, put on a different shirt, come in and vote again. That's what the president suggests has happened on Election Day.
Well, I wasn't in Florida on Election Day, but I can tell you that the Broward County Elections Office has consistently not followed the elections code in Florida. And I think that's why a lot of people are alarmed. You know, in Palm Beach right now, the supervisor of elections there, Susan Booker, seems to have just given up. But
on that, have you heard any suggestion of, do you think that is possible that happened? I mean, you've been around this.
Kate,
you've been in the political world a long time. You've been around a lot of elections. Do you really think that people are returning to their cars and by putting on a hat and a different shirt and coming in, they're able to vote twice?
Kate, I will just tell you that fraud hides in the shadows of noncompliance. We have election laws to prevent fraud, and it's essential that the people who run our elections abide by those laws to the letter.
Right. And fraud is a bad thing and should be found out. But on this, you've not seen this. You've not heard about this. You don't think this is possible?
I was not in Florida on Election Day, but I can tell you that Palm Beach and Broward County's supervisors of elections have not conducted this election with the exacting standards that Florida's law requires. Susan Booker, the election supervisor in Palm Beach County, seems to have just stopped running the ballots through the machines. Now, at 3 o'clock today, if she does not submit a number from her machine count, then we will revert back to the number we had on Saturday. That's what Florida's law says.
There has been a lot of focus on the supervisors of elections in these two counties. When it comes to, you've got Palm Beach County, you've got Broward County. When it comes to Broward County, the governor, your candidate, the governor, could take Brenda Snipes off the job. She was put in place 15 years ago by Jeb Bush under those kind of exact same circumstances, not during an election. He does, but why hasn't he removed her then if she's so bad?
Well, you know, Governor, first off, he did send monitors to Broward County's elections this year to try to bolster her and try to increase the chances of compliance. But the governor takes that responsibility very seriously. You know, not many governors in America have that ability to remove a local official from office. And Governor Scott strongly believes that the will of the voters ought to be honored. That's why he is very reticent to remove any locally elected official. And Brenda Snipes is an elected official. I think a lot of people are unaware that in Florida, the supervisor of elections is elected at the ballot box. She's a partisan office holder. She's nominated as a Democrat. She runs as a Democrat.
The president would like to see her removed. The president thinks that she should be removed. Rick Scott disagrees with him.
Well, Governor Scott, again, he takes that. He's very judicious with that power. He believes that the voters at the local level should determine who runs their elections.
So that's not going to happen in the realm of the recount happening. She's not going to be removed within the time frame between now and when a final count is done. Is that what you're saying?
You know, again, she needs to do her job. That's what I would tell you. And I think, again, Governor Scott believes that the local elected officials are the ones that should run the election. But they should do it according to Florida law. That's all we ask.
Brad Todd, thank you for coming in. There's a lot more to discuss. Come back on anytime. He's on his way out, but he's not done yet. Republican retiring Senator Jeff Flake announcing yesterday that he will move to block President Trump's judicial nominees unless he gets a vote on a bill to protect the special counsel Robert Mueller. Listen.
With the firing of the Attorney General, and in my view, the improper installation of an acting Attorney General who has not been subject to confirmation by this body, the President now has this investigation in his sights, and we all know it. I have informed the Majority Leader that I will not vote to advance any of the 21 judicial nominees pending in the Judiciary Committee or vote to confirm the 32 judges awaiting confirmation on the Senate floor until S. 2644 is brought to the full Senate for a vote.
And he's not the only conservative speaking out right now. A group of conservative attorneys is now joining forces to stand up to what they fear is a broad-based presidential power grab coming from the White House. Joining me right now is one of those attorneys, Marissa Malik. She's a former clerk for Justice Clarence Thomas. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
First on the group coming together of conservative attorneys, what was the tipping point for you when it came to the president?
I've been pretty opposed to a lot of the things the president has said from the very beginning. I was one of the signers of the Originalists Against Trump letter. During the election process, I felt like he was kind of up to the same tactics he's doing now, lying, misrepresenting information, seeming to not really have a proper sense of the way a constitutional democracy is supposed to work. And recently, just right after the midterm elections, with asking the Attorney General Sessions to resign, that was sort of the tipping point for me to really get involved.
What do you then think of what Jeff Flake is threatening? A vote to protect Mueller or no Trump judges, to sum up. What do you think of that?
I think it's a little aggressive for my style. There are a lot of aspects of the Trump administration that I and other members of Checks and Balances like, one of them being judges. The president recently nominated Naomi Rao to the D.C. Circuit. I think she's very well qualified. I'd be excited to see her. Obviously, on the other hand, the Mueller investigation is incredibly important. That's a big reason why, I wanted to be part of a group like Checks and Balances, because you've seen from the White House a dismantling or a disrespect for the independence of the criminal justice system. So it's a balance. I probably wouldn't have gone as aggressive as Senator Flake, but that's certainly his prerogative.
Yeah, I mean, because you might not like his methods, but he is, as you're saying, putting in place conservative judges. So is that trade not worth it?
For me, it's not worth it. I think appointing judges is one of the most important obligation and responsibility of a president. And on this score, I think that the president is doing an excellent job. However, I do think it's important to speak publicly about the importance of the independence of the Mueller investigation. I think a president singling right after the midterm elections, asking Attorney General Sessions to resign, and then appointing or putting in place a representative who I believe is in an unconstitutional position. Attorney generals must be confirmed with the advice and consent of the Senate. That's not what happened here. I think that's problematic, and the normalization that the president is doing is also problematic. Do we want to get rid of judges as a result and hold that up? I wouldn't go that far, but I do think it's important to speak up against the importance of protecting the Mueller investigation.
Now, something that definitely can't go unnoticed is that the group, Checks and Balances, is organized by George Conway, well-known conservative legal voice, legal mind, yes, but also the husband of Kellyanne Conway, the counselor to the president, the counselor who defends the president and the policies that you were speaking out about, and the moves that the president has made that you were speaking out about. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, and I do think it's important to clarify that Checks and Balances isn't reflectively an anti-Trump organization. It cares about the rule of law. It cares about, a free, independent judiciary as well as a criminal justice system. It cares about civil discourse, individual rights, and it will stand against any administration that abuses that, whether or not that's the president or another administration. So I think it's important to make clear that this really is about ideas, and it's ideas that we think no one has been really talking about. It happens to be, obviously President Trump is what's sort of motivating our group to sort of come together, but this really shouldn't.
Just a short time from now, a federal judge is expected to offer his first ruling on the case of CNN suing the Trump administration over pulling the press credential of Chief White House correspondent Jim Acosta. CNN is seeking a restraining order right now while the bigger arguments are being considered. CNN's Brian Stelter is following all of this for us, as he has been. Brian, we're expecting a ruling from the judge today. What could happen today?
Yeah, this is a 3 p.m. hearing by Judge Timothy J. Kelly in U.S. District Court. This is essentially round one. He's going to rule on whether there's a temporary restraining order that's going to be granted in this case. That TRO would then get Jim Acosta's press pass back in his hands for the next couple of weeks. Then at that point, there will be a longer-term hearing, a longer-term court case, unless at some point the government decides to settle. So that is if he approves the temporary restraining order request. What essentially that means is the judge is saying, okay, we think that on the merits you're likely to win a full case, so we're going to give you that restraining order for now. If CNN does not prevail today, if the government does prevail and the TRO is denied, then again, this is going to go in a kind of a longer term situation, round 2, round 3, round 4. But it would be a setback because it would be a signal that the judge was not all that convinced by CNN's arguments yesterday.
After today's decision, no matter what it is, what is next?
Yeah, this is, on a micro level about Acosta, but on a macro level, it's about a lot of reporters and a lot of access issues at the White House and beyond. So what CNN wants in the long term is a ruling from the judge that what the Trump administration did last week is unconstitutional, that you can't go picking and choosing which reporters are going to get kicked out because you don't like their questions. So that could be determined in the weeks or months to come in some sort of hearing format or in a trial. Look, CNN's asking for a jury trial. A lot of experts don't think it's going to get to that point, but that's what we're going to start to find out today. And of course, down the road, we're going to see if the Trump administration tries to do this with other reporters. Because if they feel emboldened with Acosta, if they feel they can get away with it with Acosta, I think there's concern in a lot of newsrooms that this kind of pattern of behavior by the Trump administration might continue.
Oh, for sure. That's why you see other news organizations doing Friends of Brief.
Yes, exactly. Pretty much every news outlet in the country is standing with CNN.
This actually was one of the topics that came up last night when I had the pleasure of joining Seth Meyers on Late Night with Seth Meyers.
Oh, yes, I saw this. Your late night debut.
My late night debut. We were also fortunately able to have a lot of bit of fun about my last appearance on NBC News, NBC News in the form of an SNL skit. Listen.
How did you find out? Were you watching or did somebody text you?
It's actually the craziest story. A friend of mine had tickets and was going, and we'd actually been out to drinks with him before, and we went to a dinner, and I was like, oh, if we could just come with you. Think of if I would have been able to be in the seat. I don't know if it would have been mortified or awesome. A friend started texting me, they send like these ominous text messages like, did you watch SNL tonight? And I was like, oh my God, no. Like, oh my God, what's about to happen to me? And then someone sent me the clip, and it was like, oh my God. And also a realization, when my family finally, started joining in on the fun, realizing it, it's like tonight, they'll be like, oh, you finally made it. You're on with Seth Meyers. You were on SNL. Oh, you finally made it. I was like, but guys, I've been to the White House. I've interviewed the president. I've been doing this forever. Like, now you're proud of me? Okie dokie.
I'm sure that's just that parent thing. I'm sure they've been proud the whole time.
No.
They just say it the wrong way.
Sure.
But seriously, I will say, being here tonight, you've officially made it. Thank you. Kate Baldwin, everybody out there.
You made it.
He's a riot.
Were you nervous to be on Late Night?
Of course.
It seems kind of intimidating to me.
If you're not nervous, you don't have blood rushing through your veins. I mean, it's a live studio audience. I invited them all here to the 11 today. No one showed up. I don't know what that says about my performance.
Well, I'm here.
But you're here. The crew's here. Bruce is still here. It's very fun. It's a real pleasure.
It's pretty great. It's up on Hulu. People can watch it.
And I told them I promised to try to not give them too much joke material from our show. Some question as to whether she has enough votes to get the gavel. Joining me right now, the number 2 Democrat in the House right now, who also wants to be the next majority leader, Congressman Steny Hoyer. Congressman, thanks for coming in.
You bet, Kate. Good to be with you.
Let's start with you. Do you have the votes to be the next majority leader?
Yeah, I do.
Plain and simple.
Plain and simple. We put a letter out the other day with about 2/3 of the caucus on it, and I have another good number, 20 or 30 who are also on, but who didn't get on the letter, and some others are going to get on a later letter. But yes, we have enough commitments to be assured of victory. I'm not taking it for granted. I've talked to every member, and I've been very pleased with their response.
So there's good confidence there. But then how about Nancy Pelosi? She says she is 100% confident that she's going to be the next speaker. Are you 100% confident of that?
Look, well, I'm 100% confident. I've worked with Nancy Pelosi for a very long time, and she's a very good counter of votes, and she's very focused. And if she says she's got the votes, I wouldn't bet against her.
That's a strong statement. But Congressman, let me ask you this. Seth Moulton, one of your colleagues, he's one of the Democrats who wants someone else to be speaker. I want to play for you what he said to CNN last night about leadership.
It's time that our caucus leadership represent the American people. We've never had a leader of the House who's a woman of color, for example. The American people have been very, very clear that it's time for new leadership, and we can't answer that call by reinstalling the same leadership we've had since 2006.
Does he have a point?
Look, I think what the American people voted for just last week was a change in policies, not so much personalities or people, but a change in policies. They wanted to make sure that their health care protection was in place, and that if they had a pre-existing condition, they'd be able to get insurance. They wanted to make sure that their prescription drug prices did not go so high that they couldn't afford something that gives them health and or life. So they wanted the middle class, working people wanted to make sure that their Social Security and Medicare were assured, and that they had a policy focused on them, jobs, education, retraining. So I think when you look at it from a personality standpoint, I don't think that's how the American public look at it. They look at it, who's going to help me? Who's going to build our economy? Who's going to make my life more secure and my family's life better? I think that's the way they look at it, and I think that that's what's important, that we pursue the policies that we promised to pursue, which will give the working men and women of this country, and by the way, those who are not working, make sure they can get jobs. So it seems to me that's what this election was about, and that's what we ought to be about.
And for Democrats who would vote against Nancy Pelosi, or Democrats who would vote against you if they would, what's the consequence if you then win these leadership positions? Should their committee assignments suffer if they don't believe in you and they don't back you?
Look, you have a lot of people who have voted against Leader Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi in the past, and they've gotten good committee assignments. I'm not going to go through the log, but there are a number of them that have done that. So the answer to your question, no, I don't think there's going to be retribution. People have to make a judgment. My own judgment is the party needs to be unified on behalf of the policies that we promoted and we pledged to during the course of this campaign. And they were pretty specific. And in my opinion, that's why we won the election, not based upon personalities. We won, the Republicans who went after, as they have in the past over the last decade or 2 decades, Ms. Pelosi. Yeah. But what people voted on was they believed the policies we were promoting and supporting were better for them. And I think that's why we won. And I think that's what we're going to promote. Certainly as majority leader, I will be in charge of the schedule and of putting legislation on the floor. And I'm going to put legislation on the floor which promotes the policies that we said we're going to support, including making the Affordable Care Act stable and bring health care prices down. We're going to deal, obviously, with the reform package at the beginning of the session, which will deal with redistricting reform, voting rights assurance so that everybody is assured of the right to vote, ethics reform, and campaign finance reform.
Well, that actually I actually wanted to ask you about the next Congress and priorities there, because when it comes to, look, now it's divided government again, and you can put a lot of stuff through the House. Does it get through the Senate? Does it get to the president? The president was asked about this the day after the election and he said a lot during that press conference, of course, Congressman, but one of the things that he said is that one of the things that he said during the press conference had to do with making deals with Democrats. Listen to this.
It really could be a beautiful bipartisan type of situation. This way, they'll come to me, we'll negotiate, maybe we'll make a deal, maybe we won't. That's possible. But we have a lot of things in common on infrastructure. We want to do something on health care. They want to do something on health care. There are a lot of great things that we can do together.
Do you really believe at all that there will be this beautiful bipartisanship?
I don't know that there'll be beautiful bipartisanship, but I think the president, we Democrats, the House of Representatives, the Senate, have an obligation to the American people to try to reach consensus, particularly on issues that the president mentioned. I agree with him. We are for infrastructure. We need to make substantial infrastructure investments so America will create jobs and remain competitive in the global community. So we ought to try to work on that. I'm hopeful that we can. I'm hopeful that we can reach an agreement. I'm hopeful that we can reach an agreement, as the president references, on health care. Now, we've had very substantial differences. However, it is interesting that during the course of the campaign, the president said he wanted a health care insurance system that covered everybody in America at lower cost and higher quality. And Kate, you probably heard me say it. As soon as he sends that bill down to the Congress of the United States, I'm voting for it. But he said perhaps we can reach agreement. I'm hopeful that we can reach agreement. We think the Affordable Care Act was a great start. And we added 20+ million people under insurance. That was a great assurance for them. And it would help bring health care costs down for everybody. So if we can do it, we have a responsibility to do it, and we're certainly going to try.